Hey everybody, welcome to Beaming Notes, and today we're going to look at the critical analysis, poetic devices, and theme of the poem The Gift of India by Sarojini Naidu. Critical analysis. Being a patriot herself, Sarojini Naidu has captured the pride in one's heart for the honorable Indian soldiers by personifying Mother India. The poem evokes a sense of pride as well as grief at the loss of a number of lives of the Indian soldiers in the First World War. The poem begins with Mother India asking if she has withheld any resources from the world, be it garments, clothes, or food. She suggests that even though the British were exploiting the Indian resources for their own selfish needs, India has always fulfilled their global obligations. Mother India has given her sons to serve the world in crisis without hesitation. India is firmly committed to honoring her international commitments, which she proved by sending out the sons born out of her womb. In addition to the pride of the mother in her son's achievements, a sense of pain and agony is expressed in the poem, which is suggestive of mother's pain on being separated from her children. Mother India laments the death of the Indian soldiers who gave up their lives wholeheartedly to honor their country's dignity. She speaks about the brutal manner in which the soldiers have died, some scattered like shells on the Egyptian sea, while some on the shores of Persian Sea. The poet refers to the Indian soldiers who died in Persia, Egypt, Belgium, and France during the First World War. The Indian soldiers had no real motives to participate in the war except to serve the British. In literature, writers and poets have often glorified wars. However, Sarojini Naidu in this poem tries to bring out the futile and brutal aspect of wars as she mentions how the dead soldiers are not even given a proper burial. They lie with pale brows and broken hands in alien graves. Mother India is grief-stricken and sorrowful as she thinks about the unfortunate ends of the Indian soldiers. These soldiers have valiantly fought to maintain the integrity and honor of their motherland. Amidst all the pain and suffering, Mother India feels proud of her sons who have sacrificed their lives in the battlefield as she sees a hope for a better future where there is no hatred, terror, or wars. The sad, glorious vision is a suggestion to the hope that the Indian soldiers would someday stop serving the British and wage a war against them to free themselves from their tyranny. The sad part of their vision is a loss of several lives in the war, whereas the glorious part is yet to come, which will ensure peace and harmony in the world. Finally, she urges people to remember and respect the contribution of Indian soldiers when love and peace takes over hatred and cruelty. She asks the British to remember and value the sacrifices that the Indian soldiers have made for them. The Gift of India is a short poem of 24 lines with a specific rhyming pattern. Each line in the poem rhymes with the next line, adding a certain lucidity to the poem. A number of figures of speech have been used in the poem to enhance the beauty of the language of the poem. These include alliteration, metaphor, simile, personification, rhetorical questions, and oxymorons. Sarojini Naidu has excelled in incorporating poetic imagery in her poems. In this poem too, we find a number of visual, auditory, and colorful imagery. For instance, the image of the dead Indian soldiers gathered like pearls in their alien graves is a pictorial representation of the ravages of the wars. The red banners of victory bring forward a suggestion of a victory at the cost of the blood of the Indian soldiers. This poem can, however, be read as an anti-war poem that brings forward the tragic aspect of wars. The horrid image of the soldiers lying dead in alien lands and the blood-tainted meadows bring forward a picture that is hard to praise. Mother India's lamentation for the loss of the Indian soldiers in wars can be seen as a reflection of every Indian mother lamenting the loss of her martyred son. In the end, she hopes for a world that would be free from the brutality of the war, a world that would be modeled on peace and harmony, a world that will remember the contributions of the martyred Indian soldiers. Poetic devices. Personification. It is a figure of speech in which an inanimate object or abstract ideas are invested with the attributes of living beings. The most evident example of personification in this poem is observed when the country India is given the emotions and attributes of a mother. The whole poem is narrated from the perspective of a mother who laments the loss of her sons, but in the same time is proud of their contributions to live up to their global commitments. The entire poem is narrated in the first-person narrative. For example, she calls the Indian soldiers her priceless treasures torn from her breast. Other instances of personification are, "Remember the blood of my martyred sons. Can you measure the grief of the tears I weep, or compass the woe of the watch I keep?" Metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech in which a comparison between two different things is implied but not clearly stated. For instance, in this poem, the Indian soldiers are compared to the priceless treasures. Simile. It is a figure of speech in which a similarity between two different objects is stated explicitly using the words as or like. For example, the gathered dead bodies of Indian soldiers in their graves are compared to pearls in their shells. Gathered like pearls in their alien graves, scattered like shells on Egyptian sands, they are strewn like blossoms moved down by chance. Alliteration. Alliteration is a close repetition of consonant sounds in a sentence. For example, silent they sleep, scattered like shells. They lie with pale brows and brave, broken hands. Rhetorical question. Rhetorical question is a question asked in order to create a dramatic impact or make a point rather than to get an answer. An instance of rhetoric can be seen in the line, "Can you measure the grief of the tears I weep, or compass the woe of the watch I keep?" Oxymoron. It's a figure of speech in which two contradictory terms appear together in a sentence. For example, "And the far, sad, glorious vision I see." Form and structure. The poem is composed of 24 lines that follow a very simple and patterned rhyming scheme. All the 4 stanzas in the poem follow the same pattern, as every line in the poem rhymes with the next line. For instance, "Is there aught you need that my hands withhold, rich gifts of raiment of grain or gold? Lo, I have flung to the east and west, priceless treasures torn from my breast, and yielded the sons of my stricken womb, the drum beats of duty, the sabers of doom." In the first paragraph, every line rhymes with the next line, making the rhyming scheme AABBCC. Withhold rhymes with gold, west rhymes with breast, womb rhymes with doom. Again, in the second stanza, the same pattern is repeated. "Gathered like pearls in their alien graves, silent they sleep by the Persian waves. Scattered like shells on Egyptian sands, they lie with pale brows and brave, broken hands. They are strewn like blossoms moved down by chance, on the blood-brown meadows of Flanders and France." Similarly, in the third and fourth paragraphs follow the same rhyme scheme of AABBCC. Theme. Patriotism. The theme of patriotism is the most evident theme in the poem. This theme of patriotism for motherland runs in a lot of other poems by Sarojini Naidu. This poem is a tribute to the martyred Indian soldiers who gave up their lives in wars fought by the British during the First World War. Since the very beginning of the poem, this theme of patriotism is predominant. Mother India reminds the world of the priceless treasures that she has gifted the world. She has sent her sons to foreign lands to fight the foreign wars. The Indian soldiers have fought in the battlefield with full vigor and enthusiasm. They have shed their blood and sweat to fight someone else's war, to protect the honor of their motherland. This poem brings forward the contributions of the brave soldiers of India in embodying the spirit of a brave country like India. It evokes a sense of grief at the loss of the Indian soldiers who fought valiantly in the First World War. However, a sense of pride overcomes a sense of despair as Mother India realizes the achievements of the soldiers. Sarojini Naidu tries to describe the pain of a mother whose son has been torn away from her bosom and buried in alien lands. The poetess also presents a picture of the dead soldiers lying scattered in the foreign soil with broken limbs and disfigured bodies. The ruthless manner in which they have been killed in the war is portrayed through a number of images. The lifeless bodies lying like blossoms on blood-tainted battlefields brings a picture of the pain and suffering of the soldiers who gave their lives for their beloved motherland. In the end, a note of optimism and hope overpowers the mood of the poem. The poetess anticipates a time when man would be free from the shackles of dominance and cruelty and live in a world where hatred will be overpowered by love. She urges the world to pay respect and homage to the martyred soldiers for their heroism so that their names can be immortalized in the history as brave men who died to protect the honor of the country. This poem glorifies the sacrifices of Indian soldiers for their motherland and raises a sense of respect and appreciation in the readers for bold and patriotic Indian soldiers. There is no glory in war. Literature has glorified wars and war heroes since a very long time. Many writers and poets have justified wars by praising and romanticizing the war heroes. For several years, people regarded war as a manly endeavor. This notion was, however, shattered in the beginning of 20th century when the horrors of the First World War left its mark on human civilization. The innumerable death, the damage and destruction of life and property, the brutality with which men killed each other, and the new weapons and chemicals that were exposed to humanity turned the gift of nature into a wasteland where ashes were found in place of flowers and blood in place of holy water. In this poem too, the horrors of war are depicted vividly. The image of the great soldiers lying motionless, gathered like pearls in their alien graves, with broken hands and severed limbs, add as a sad and pathetic note to the soldiers involved in wars. They are denied the proper respect of a burial, as well as they lie in alien graves. Some lie dead by the Persian Sea, while others lie scattered like shells on the Egyptian sands. Their families do not get to see them for the last time. They lie colorless and lifeless, covered in blood, in the blood-tainted battlefields where nobody knows them. Thus, it will be right to say that although Sarojini Naidu urges people to pay a tribute to the dead soldiers, she also successfully brings forward the ruthlessness, savagery, and inhumanness of wars.